Hey, it's Philip with G6 Technology Services. In this video, we're going to be going over how to flash the Tasmota firmware onto the Sonoff S31 Lite. So let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is get our Sonoff out of the box. This is a brand new unit I haven't opened yet, but all you get in here is just the unit itself and then a little booklet, which we're not going to need. So I'm just going to set all this kind of off to the side. And what you have is just a standard Wi-Fi plug. It's just a plug with a relay. It connects to Wi-Fi. Normally you have to connect it to the, I think it's that EWE link, some kind of app. It uses some Chinese cloud server stuff, so I don't really like that. I think the product's built well and I like it. And I'd like to be able for it to be local control only on the local network. Doesn't need internet, no cloud services, no sketchy apps or whatnot. So we're going to put Tasmota on here, and that will allow us to use this thing completely independently. And if you don't have any home automation set up, you can still use this with the Tasmota firmware on it. It makes a web server run on here, and you can just connect to the IP address of this device on your phone or your computer, and you can toggle it on and off, set up timers. It does have some kind of rudimentary automation just built into the firmware. But if you want to do anything more than that, it's recommended that you go with something like Home Assistant that lets you use some advanced automations. So anyway, this is the unit. We'll put that off to the side. The next thing that you're going to need for this is some kind of serial to USB adapter. This is a CH340G, I believe. Yes, CH340C. CH340C, not G, is what it says on there. It's kind of hard to read. But anyway, this board's made by SparkFun. You can get them on Amazon. If you just search for CH340 SparkFun, you can find it. Actually, I'll link some of this stuff in the description below if you want to follow along with the same stuff that I'm using. So what this is it allows us to connect serial, and it converts to USB for the computer. We have some software that we're going to be using called Tasmotizer. I'll show you that at the end. So what we're going to need to do here is utilize our next thing, which is these male to female Dupont wires, or breadboard or jumper wires, different names for them. And that's going to help us to connect our serial to USB adapter to the next thing, which is pretty cool, is this little test clip, which just has these spring-loaded pins that allow you to interface with test pads on a circuit board without having to solder onto it. That's one of the common things with these firmware conversions that you'll see online, is people saying that you have to solder wires onto the board. That's a little bit, of a hassle and kind of takes some time up. So this is super quick and easy. I'll link this below too. You can get that on Amazon. It's a 2-pack for like $12 or $13 or something. It's well worth it to me. But anyway, you're gonna need that. We're gonna need some kind of prying implement so we can get into here. I do recommend something metal. I've tried with plastic ones before to try not to damage the plastic shell, but they're usually too weak and they just bend and it doesn't work. So we are going to use a metal prying implement. And then the next thing you need is a #1 Phillips screwdriver, and that's very important because you will strip out the head of these screws if you use the wrong screwdriver, and then you pretty much can't get into it, or you're going to have to just break the case to get into it. Don't ask me how I know. So I'll link this too. I just like this nice little handle. It's very grippy. It's a CRAFTSMAN one, but you can use whatever you have as long as it's a #1 Phillips that has a tip that's still in good shape, not all, but you've been using it for prying or chiseling or something and it's damaged. You want a nice, sharp, pristine Phillips tip. Otherwise, you will mess up those screw heads and never be able to get into it. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is pry off this gray plastic cover on the side. This is going to allow us to then remove these little plastic covers and get to where the screws are. So again, since I said I'm going to be using a metal pry tool, we're going to pry from the back. So that way if we scratch it, once it's plugged in, you're not going to see it. Sometimes it's easy to get off, sometimes it's hard. Really just depends. I don't know, the tolerances are not that good on these, so you never know what you're going to end up getting. One thing I can say is don't try to pry it into your hand because it will slip off and you'll impale yourself. So we're going to do it onto the table, and all you need to do is just pry down just like that, and it just comes off. It's actually pretty easy, and it just has some little plastic kind of tabs that hold it on. And then we'll just slide these plastic corner covers right off the back, and that reveals 3 Phillips screws that we're going to need to remove. So we'll go ahead and do that. Just insert the screwdriver, make sure it feels like it's going in there right, because you don't want to mess these screws up. Otherwise, it's very difficult to try to recover from that. And they are just screwed straight into a plastic post. They're not nicely threaded or anything, so they're very like chewy and kind of stiff and hard to get out. It's not an easy removal, and so you really have to have a good screwdriver, otherwise you'll end up just stripping the thread because it's so hard to turn it. So there's only 3 of these, not 4, which is kind of bothering my OCD a little bit, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and get rid of these, and then that'll let us into the case, which is also very easy to get into. Overall, I'd say once you've done a few of these, you'll be able to knock them out in no time. If you get a couple of the cheap 4-packs on Amazon, which I think it was like, I don't know, I want to say like $20. I'll link those in the description too. You can just buy like everything you see here on Amazon. But I think you can get a 4-pack for like 20 bucks. These things are like 5 a piece or something like that. So if you get a couple of those and you just start knocking them out, you'll get pretty quick at it. But anyway, so now that the screws are all out, you just grab the prongs and then grab the case and then just pull it apart and it's separated. So once we have it opened up, you'll be able to see all the magic inside. And really all it is, you have some power supply circuitry for the low voltage stuff. You have your relay, that's what actually enables and disables your load. It switches the plug. And then this board is where all the brains are. So you have a button on this side, our test pads that we're going to be interfacing with. And then on the other side, we'll have our ESP8266 microprocessor that has Wi-Fi support. So that's kind of what does all the business, is back in here. I think it's that one. So anyway, the next step is you'll see if I can get this to focus. Right here, these test pads are what we need to interface with. You have VCC, that's your positive DC volts, which is 3.3 volts in this case. RX is your serial receive. TX is your serial transmit. And then I don't know what these are used for, DTX, DRX. We're not using those, just pretend they don't exist. And then our ground, which is your negative DC connection. So the cool thing is we don't have to solder onto these or try to hold wires on with your finger. Yeah, I've tried that, it works, not fun. So what we're gonna do instead is utilize the test clip. So this will line up perfectly with the pins on here, and you just go like that. And then now all your pins are connected and you can just connect your Dupont wires onto these terminals up here. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. And you just need to do the same order. See how they line up like that. So our VCC is the first one, and it doesn't matter what color wires you use, but I like to kind of color code it to make it easier to figure out what everything is. So we'll do red for VCC. And then the last one is ground. So we'll use a black wire for that. And then the second is RX, third is TX. So these don't really matter at all. You can just kind of guess or choose whatever you want, I mean. So I just have these green and yellow because that's what was connected next to each other on this giant strip of these wires that I peeled it off from. It was just kind of a random selection. So once we have our test clip connected, then we have to connect our USB to serial adapter. So in this case, we'll see kind of the same labels. We'll use our, now the silk screen's not the best on here, but this third one down is our TX, this one's RX, VCC, and ground. The CTX and DTR we're not using. So all we need to do is just make the same connection. So remember I said the red was gonna be VCC. I don't know if you can kind of see that, but that's gonna be right here. Can't see through the camera, I have to look. All right, so that's there. And then the black one's the ground, which goes right here. And then these are, you have to do backwards. So remember on here, it was RX and TX. So the RX on here needs to connect to the TX on here. So our RX was green, so the green one needs to go to TX. And then the yellow one goes to RX on here because it was TX on the other one. So that's all we have to do, connect everything up. And you can see the positions don't match, so you can't just put them in the same order. You have to look at the labels and match it based on that. So now what we're gonna do is clip on our test clip, which all you have to do is just line the pins up and then just release the clip, and the spring tension will hold it in place. And then we can just kind of set that down, and we don't really need to do anything with that right now. So the next thing we'll do is plug our USB cable in. So the other end of this is important. You have to follow this step or it won't work. The other end of this is not plugged into the computer yet. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug this into here. So now we're ready to go. So now what you have to do in order for this to go into programming mode, you have to hold the button down. There's a button right here. You have to hold it down, and now we can plug the other end of the cable into the computer. So let me do that, it's off camera. Okay, so that's plugged in, and just keep that button held down for a few seconds. That's gonna put the processor into programming mode, and so that should be long enough. So now we're ready to actually do the software part of it. So let me take the camera down off the stand and I'll show you on the computer what we're gonna do. All right, sorry I don't have a nice screen capture set up here, but this is the Tasmotizer software. I'll link to it in the description so you can find it, but you just download this exe. There's nothing to install. You just double click on it and it'll open. The only thing that'll be a little bit tricky is depending on which adapter that you're using, you're gonna have to find the drivers for it and install it so Windows can identify it. So in my case, it was the SparkFun one. They have instructions on their product page on their website and on Amazon where to get the software. So I have that installed already. If we scan my COM ports, all I have is COM3, so that's gonna be this adapter. But you can look in Device Manager and see if you can find a USB to serial. You may have more than one showing up depending on what kind of computer you have. Sometimes your chipset will have other integrated devices, Intel management console or whatever, it's management framework and things like that. You might have random stuff showing up in here, so you need to identify which COM port is correct, and in this case I know it's this because it's the only one, and when I unplug the adapter it goes away. That's a good way to tell too. Just go in Device Manager, look at all your COM ports, unplug your adapter, plug it back in, see which one disappears and shows back up again. So anyway, what we're going to do here is not select Save Original Firmware because I don't want that. It says recommended when you flash a Sonoff for the first time. Without a backup, you will not be able to restore the original functionality. I have no desire to ever restore the original functionality, so I don't care about the original firmware, but that's up to you. If you want to return it to using the Chinese app and cloud service, then you can save the firmware and put it back on there later, but I don't need to do that. By default, it comes up to bin file and asks you to select an image, so you can, if you have one in particular you want to use, you can do that. But I'm just going to use the release version, which should just automatically download the latest available version. We don't need to select the self-resetting device for this tool. So we'll go ahead, or for this board, and then we're going to do erase before flashing. And all you have to do is just hit this Tasmotize button. It's going to download the firmware, connect to the ESP8266 microcontroller, erase the onboard flash memory, and start writing the Tasmota firmware onto it. And it only takes, about a minute or so. It's pretty quick. We'll just go ahead and I'll just show you this whole process. Like I said, it's already halfway done. It's only been a couple of seconds here, so it is pretty fast. And once you start doing this, like I said, you'll fly through all the steps. It's taken a little while for me to explain everything, but Tasmotizer remembers all your settings, so if you are just going through one after the other, you don't have to keep checking all those boxes. So it looks like we're almost done. It's going to ask us to power cycle the device. So all I usually do for that, successful. All I usually do for that is just unplug the USB cable out of the computer and then plug it back in again. So we're just going to do that real quick. And then if we look over at our device, you can kind of see it's upside down, so like under here there's a little blue light flashing. So it's powering back up. I'm not going to disturb it while it's connected to this clip, because if you move it too much it might move the pin connections around and disconnect. So now that we have Tasmota on there and it is booting back up, we're going to go and click Send Config. So in the default state of how this is now with a fresh copy of Tasmota on there, it's going to be broadcasting a Wi-Fi network called Tasmota and then some numbers and letters after it, which I think might have to do with the MAC address, but maybe not. You can connect to that from your laptop. I think there's no password, and then it'll bring you to the web interface and you can connect to the Wi-Fi and you can set all your settings. But I just find it easier to go ahead and send the Wi-Fi config immediately, and then that way it just shows up on my network and I don't have to mess with connecting to temporary networks and whatnot. So I just have this IoT network that I use. I'm going to paste the password in that I copied earlier. We just have this Wi-Fi box checked. Type in your SSID name and password. You can set an alternate Wi-Fi recovery network, but I don't use that. You can change your module or template. I'm not going to do that. And you can set your MQTT settings, but I'm just going to wait and do that afterwards. So all we do is hit save, and then it says the device will restart. Click OK. And then all you have to do is just wait a couple of seconds, and then if you hit get IP, there we go, we're on the network. So you can now use this IP address to put it into your browser and you can connect to the device. But I would probably not do that while it's in this condition. Now that we know it's on the network, this is a good time to stop and go ahead and put the thing back together. So to start doing that, we're just going to unplug our USB cable just to kill power, unplug our test clip, and then let me put the camera back up and I'll show you the reassembly process. All right, so we can move this out of the way. Don't need that right now. We're going to put our cover back on. So you just line up how the prongs are, and it should just easily slide on. You shouldn't have to press it at all. Now the next thing, this is very important. I guess not so important if you're never going to take it apart again, but whenever you're screwing a screw into a plastic case and there's no threaded metal insert, it's just threading right into the plastic, you want to reuse the threads that are in there, not cut new threads. It'll make it screw in easier, and it'll greatly extend the lifespan of this hole without it getting all like reamed out from cutting a bunch of threads if you're taking the screw in and out a bunch. If you're only doing it once, I guess it doesn't really matter, but I'm just in the habit of doing this every time. And what this is that you're going to do is you put the screw in, and instead of starting to screw it down, you're going to spin it backwards, and you'll feel it click and drop down. And once it does that, you'll know that you've started the thread. So now you can go back the other way, and you're using the same threads that it was using before. So it screws in really easily, and you're not gouging up the inside of this plastic pillar that it's screwing into. So we'll go ahead and do that to the other one. Go ahead and start that. And then you turn it backwards until it clicks, and then go forward. And now we have 2 out of the 3 in. We'll go back and do our third one, the same thing. Backwards until it clicks, and then go forward. And when you're tightening these, you want to get it sort of snug. Don't crank it down too much because you'll end up damaging it. So once it starts getting tight, maybe just give it another little tiny turn. We'll put our corner protectors back on, and they go, I think, in a certain way, so if it doesn't work, just flip it around. Okay, those are back on. And then this thing, we want to make sure we're lining up the power button with the same orientation, so it should go like this, same orientation as the plug. We don't want it upside down. I guess it's symmetrical, so it'll still work anyway, but I just don't like it being upside down. So what you can try to do is push this on with your fingers. The other thing you can do is if you just kind of line it up and put it down and just kind of bop it, that helps it go on too if you're having a hard time. But now it's fully back together, so you should be able to now plug this into a wall outlet. It will rejoin the Wi-Fi and come up with the same IP address that it showed you on the computer, so you can log in there and change all the settings. So this video is just a firmware thing. We're not going to actually go into configuring anything right now, But hopefully this was helpful and will help you flash Tasmota onto your Sonoff smart plugs. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.